go into something that happened yesterday, and I'm still trying to get some details on as it relates to the running backs. It looks like the running backs are getting serious about doing something, taking some sort of collective action. Austin Eckler, the Chargers running back, was on with Zach Gelb last night, CBS Sports Radio, saying you poke the bear and we have to do something now. Wants answers from ownership about the running back position. Well, I don't think ownership is who you have to go to. I don't think ownership cares. Ownership owns the team. It's others who are making the decision that the running back position isn't valued the way that other positions are. And I asked somebody about it today, somebody who knows very well how the dynamics work, somebody who's been involved in the NFL for a long time. I can't disclose my sources. You're just going to have to trust me on this one, that I'm not getting input from, guy who sweeps the floor, right? This is an actual real person whose name you would instantly recognize, I just said, look, because I got my theories, and I've had theories for years as to the running back market. What's going on? Why is the running back market depressed? Here's the response I got. Fundamentally, people don't think it's a position that leads to greater expected points and surplus value. Surplus value is the key. It's a salary cap league with finite resources, and that matters. So teams will spend on quarterback, receiver, pass rushers, and corner. Those are the positions that provide the most surplus value. You can blame Mike Shanahan and the analytics community. That's what I was told. And analytics has a lot to do with it. Look, this is how much are we paying and what are we getting for a lower end running back? How much more are we paying for a higher end running back? And what are we getting by way of difference? Are we getting enough surplus value for what we're paying over and above the baseline, average, random guy who can just do whatever needs to be done? No name guy who comes in and plays special teams and maybe can run the ball effectively if you need to, and maybe you need 4 yards out of him and you get 3. Okay, fine. We can consistently get something, but we're not paying much. So we can divert the resources to quarterback, corner, rush, and receiver. And I asked about receiver because it feels like receivers moving in that direction where the supply maybe outweighs the demand. All these great receivers that we see every year in the draft because of all the 7-on-7 camps out there, where quarterbacks are throwing the ball and throwing the ball and throwing the ball over and over and over again at a young age. Somebody is running the pass routes. Somebody is catching the passes. Somebody is developing as a receiver. But I was told the surplus value is still greater for the receiver position. That great receiver that you pay a lot for. Now, maybe the bar is high as to what it takes to be that high surplus value receiver, but that's why the market hasn't collapsed. In the NFL, there isn't that one guy that just screams out, you got to pay him $20 million a year because all you have to do is give him the ball and it's a touchdown or a first down. So that's the fundamental problem. Now, what are the solutions? How do you change that? Can you change it? And as Austin Eckler recognized last night, this is all a product of processes that the players agreed to. The players, through their union, agreed to this system. And this gets back to the issue of all shapes and sizes and positions of players thrown into one bucket for the purposes of collective bargaining. 4 years ago, there was an effort to break out the running backs as their own bargaining unit so they could have a seat at the table where the specific necessities and interests and realities of their position could be negotiated as part of the broader structure. And you could argue every position should have its own bargaining unit. Now, that would complicate life for the teams. See, it's better for the teams because in this system, you're paying less to everyone. You have one pot of money, and then it's up for the players through their agents to figure out who gets what. And the teams will value certain positions differently. Quarterbacks get more. And as I've said recently multiple times, quarterbacks still subsidize the rest of the team because the best quarterbacks are still worth more than they're getting, but they get less because the rest of the team needs to eat too. The rest of the team needs to have salary cap space available to them. But one very simple solution would be to have running backs with their own bargaining unit, and then they get to go to the table independent of what the union has agreed to, independent of what the league has agreed to, and come up with their own structure. That's one solution. The other solution that I've seen plenty of people suggest, but it would have to be bargained between the league and the union, a quicker path to free agency for running backs. 2 years instead of 3. See, pre-2011, it wasn't 2 years to free agency. It was 2 years to a renegotiation. Now it's 3 years to a renegotiation. Now, if you're drafted, it's 4 years to free agency. How about 3 or 2 years to free agency? What that would do, though, it may cause teams to not spend draft capital on running backs because they know that after 2 or 3 years, they're going to have to treat them as free agents and figure out what to do. Franchise tag, pay them more money, whatever. So I don't know that would be a great solution. I like the idea that Chris Sims came up with as he and I were discussing the issue months ago when Austin Eckler had requested permission to shop himself via trade, but ultimately couldn't work out a deal because nobody wants to pay him. And it's nothing against him personally. Nobody wants to pay him given the position he plays, the kind of money he wanted. Sims made the point, and I've been pulling that thread since then, that there should be a league-wide fund that pays running backs based on the yardage they gain, the touchdowns that they score, and whatever other objective factor you would want to put in there. They already have a performance-based pay system that rewards players just for playing. If you're a low draft pick and you end up starting every game and playing 98% of the snaps, you get a nice big check. I've talked about that. Why not come up with something like that just for running backs? Because they are the straw that stirs the drink in many respects. They create excitement. Fantasy football, we gotta have the great running backs. The running backs make things interesting. People buy running backs jerseys, they become star players. So if you can pay them as they're earning, as they're performing, that's the way to do it, because so many running backs become great at a time when there isn't a damn thing they can do about it financially. Look at Jonathan Taylor. He was the consensus #1 pick in fantasy last year, and he had injuries that kept that from coming to fruition, but he was operating under what would have been and what was year 3 of a second-round slotted contract. Minimum salary. Beyond round 1, you get minimum salaries for 4 years, and you get a signing bonus that is higher or lower based upon where you get picked. But you're not making much money. And you're creating this tremendous output. Why not reward those players as they go? But the problem is this. Who's going to make that happen? Who's going to be the one to say, we need to do something here? Is it the league? Is it the union? A union that represents the interests of all players? This is why we need a bargaining unit that is simply for running backs. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I've heard some chatter that the running backs are in the process of trying to come together and come up with a plan. And Austin Eckler generally and indirectly alluded to this when he was on with Zach Gelb on Monday night. I think the running backs are talking among themselves. And it's even possible that the running backs who were in negotiations for long-term contracts yesterday, the franchise tagged players. Now, I don't think Tony Pollard and the Cowboys were ever close to a long-term deal, but for Saquon Barkley and the Giants, Josh Jacobs and the Raiders, there were some talks. And it's possible that the players decided we're just not going to agree to these deals. We're going to go ahead and push this thing forward. Now, look, they're not under contract until they accept the franchise tender. They can hold out of training camp. It's not a holdout. They're not doing anything wrong. They can't be fined. They can't be sanctioned in any way. The only risk they're taking is the franchise tag gets rescinded and they become free agents. And then I guess they would say good until they see what's out there. See, that's a problem. That's why I've been talking about this possible removal of the franchise tag from Barkley and Jacobs. They're going to get $10.1 million somewhere else at this point. And the closer we get to week 1, the lesser the likelihood that they're going to find 10-1 out there from someone else. But the running backs need to figure out how they can flex their muscle and get the attention. You got to make it a priority. It's the squeaky wheel. The running backs got to figure out how to become the squeaky wheel. And they're doing a lot of squeaking. And those of us in the media are paying attention. And the fans are starting to pay attention. And the running backs are definitely paying attention. But is anyone else? Are the teams paying attention? Are the owners paying attention? Is the union paying attention? What is going to be the catalyst to get someone to say, we better fix that wheel? We better find the oil can and make that wheel not squeak. So what can the players really do at this point? See, they missed an opportunity, folks, and we've talked about this in the past. It happened a couple of years ago, 2021. there was a concerted effort to get players to withhold services during the voluntary offseason program. And it worked to a certain extent, and it caused some negotiations about reduction in workouts and reduction in intensity, but that's kind of fallen apart. It's hard to get the players to collectively do anything because it's every man for himself. So if, for example, the running backs had decided league-wide, or at least tried to do this back in March, nobody's showing up for the offseason program. Nobody. No running backs are showing up. Good luck having football practice without running backs there. Well, here's the problem. Late April rolls around, here comes the draft. Then comes undrafted free agency. You got all these players who are young and trying to prove themselves. 5th round pick, I got to make the roster. Undrafted free agent, I got to make the roster. Oh, all those other guys aren't going to show up? Well, that's just an opportunity for me to show what I can do. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to get paid. I'm trying to make a roster. You got first world problems. I got third world problems. I'm not on the team. I'm number 88 on the roster right now. I got to move my way up to 53 or higher, or I'm playing in the USFL or the XFL or the whatever the hell FL next year, and I don't want to do that. So that's where it becomes difficult. And their agents are going to advise them based upon their interests. The agent wants to develop that player into a guy who gets paid good money at some point, a guy who gets an NFL salary now. You get 3% of nothing versus 3% of whatever the guy can make. And if he can lay the foundation for a reasonable second contract, so be it. But it's going to take something like that. And I know holdouts are possible. Austin Eckler mentioned holdouts and hold-ins. Holdouts would be expensive because the CBA has been rigged to make it expensive on a daily basis. And for veterans under their second contracts, you can't even waive the fines. You know, it used to be guy holds out for a couple of weeks, whatever, and then shows up and you never hear anything about the fines. More often than not, the team just forgives the fines. Now you can't under the second contract. Under the first contract, yeah. But this is kind of a second contract problem. And I think once you get into that 5th-year option, I don't know if that counts as a second contract or not. It's something I need to take a look at. But the bottom line is holdouts get expensive. Hold-ins are hard to pull off as well because what are you getting? What are you getting? If you're Austin Eckler and you show up and you say, I'm not practicing until I get a new contract, and they say, we're not giving you a new contract, it ends at some point. We went through that last year with Roquan Smith in Chicago. It's one thing to do a hold-in where everyone knows there's eventually going to be a contract. But at some point, there isn't going to be a contract. We got to get ready for football season. We got to get ready for the games. The hold-in doesn't work unless the team agrees with the assessment that a contract needs to be done. And see, here's the problem with Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. And I've written about this and I've talked about it. This mid-July deadline, it removes whatever they could get by holding in or holding out. Because, hey, all right, you win. All right, you win. We'll give you a long-term deal. Oh, wait, we can't. We can't give you a long-term deal by rule. See, the system is rigged in favor of the teams in so many different ways. So it's going to make it hard for the running backs to do anything when it comes to joint collective activity. I encourage them to try, but be careful. You got to understand you're going to undermine your own interests. And hey, it's one of the reasons why work stoppages don't work for NFL players. Guys don't want to give up their own interests for some future player years down the road. You're going to hurt yourself to help somebody else in the future. The best way that guy in the future can help himself, and I've said this many times over the years, there's a chapter about it in Playmakers. Running backs should play different positions. The great young players, because think about what happens, youth football. You get these bozos coaching youth football. All due respect to the coaches who aren't bozos, who coach youth football, but I can speak from experience. Most of the people who coach youth football are bozos. They don't know what they're doing. So what do? You got one kid who is head and shoulders above everybody else. Just give him the ball. Let him run rings around everybody. That's where the running backs come from. The best athletes, when the kids start playing football, get the ball in their hands, because what? You don't have high-level passing games when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. Give the ball to the best kid and just let him run rings around everybody. And then you get pigeonholed as a running back. High school running back. And hey, high school running back, you get the glory. You're the guy running for the touchdowns. You're the guy that's making the team go, the most important player on the team. And then by the time you get to college, you're just a piece in that machine. And by the time you get to the NFL, you're an interchangeable part. And you are undervalued. And it's nothing against you personally, it's the position. So when that great young athlete who is clearly dominant begins to show himself at the youth level, that's when somebody's got to say, we need to get you to a different position. You know, I made this point after Jim Brown died. Jim Brown today, given the fact that he could do anything and everything athletically, Jim Brown today, if there's another Jim Brown, he's going to be a quarterback. Why wouldn't you make him a quarterback? Look at Lamar Jackson. Imagine Jim Brown as a quarterback. Look at Justin Fields. Imagine Jim Brown. Look at the way Jim Brown ran through and around anyone that was trying to tackle him. You put throwing ability on top of that, and let's just assume he would have passing ability. You know, as a great lacrosse player, you've got the hand-eye coordination that allows you to move a ball from point A to point B. Let's assume he'd be able to throw. Jim Brown would be a quarterback now. Get that kid who is a tremendous dominant athlete away from running back and get him to another position. Ben Tate, second-round pick out of Auburn, 2009-ish, of the Texans. I think later signed with the Browns as a free agent and did not get a good deal. He said at one point, if I had to do it all over again, I'd play a different position. I'd be a safety. So, look, it's not going to help any of the guys now. But to the extent we're thinking about future running backs, the message is don't play running back. And if enough guys gravitate away from running back, the supply starts to drop. The demand is still what it is. And the handful that don't gravitate from running back to another position add the surplus value. If enough guys choose not to play running back, that handful that is still really good and plays running back is going to stand out more, and the surplus value is going to be there. Here's another practical way to deal with it. And this is something Jonathan Taylor should consider because he falls into this category right now. He's got 3 years in. Hold out like Ezekiel Elliott did. Just don't show up. Ezekiel Elliott held out after 3 years, and it was ugly and it was contentious. But he ultimately got a contract that was so good, it was structured in a way the Cowboys had to keep him longer than they would have. They would have cut him last year, but for the fact that his salary for 2022 became fully guaranteed in March of 2021. It was not just an every year vesting, it would vest for next year. And once the Cowboys got past that is when the Cowboys said, see you later, Zeke. Because remember what the Cowboys did to DeMarco Murray? 2014, he set the single season rushing record for the Cowboys. And they let him walk away. And then they acquired Darren McFadden. He had a 1,000-yard season. He was the bridge to Ezekiel Elliott. But Elliott, drawing the line in the sand and holding out after 3 years, that's when you do it. If you're Saquon Barkley, if you're Josh Jacobs, if you're any of these guys looking to get paid. But the problem is, like Barkley, if he had held out after 3 years, like I can't remember what the exact injury history was, but I think year 3 is when he tore his ACL. So if you hold out after year 3, what are they going to do? They're not going to blink. We've already been playing without you, and we know that the first year back from an ACL is going to be hit or miss, and it's going to take you a while to get back into form. So you're not really going to get them to quake in their boots and give you the big contract. And that injury factor is real. Austin Eckler tried to dismiss it on CBS Sports Radio, but the problem is running backs get injured at a higher rate than other positions because they're running into that mass of bodies, many of which, most of which are bigger than them. They're in the car crashes. They're getting hit from every angle. They're getting hit in awkward ways. They're falling down in awkward ways, and they're going to get injured. Emmitt Smith, one of the rare guys who would get banged up like everybody else, but kept playing through it. Marshawn Lynch. You know, the Seahawks keep looking for the true heir to Marshawn Lynch. The problem is they can't find anybody who can keep going despite all of the inevitable injuries of the position. That's a real factor in this. And I think that adds to this idea of surplus value because you can be a great running back. You can be a better running back by far than the next opportunity that a team may have. But if the guy can't play, it doesn't matter. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.